My family threw me out the night I lost my job, packing my bags while my sister demanded I pay her loans. They saw a failure. They didn't realize I owned the very company that fired me and a mansion they'll never step foot in. Watch their world collapse. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. I always love knowing who's listening. My name is Marina Jimenez, 37 years old. And the chill that settled into my bones that night had nothing to do with the biting wind howling against the window panes of the only home I had ever known. For nearly 2 decades, I had been the silent architect of this family's comfort. A human ATM whose value was measured solely by the consistency of the direct deposits hitting their accounts every Friday morning. I stood in the center of the living room clutching a crumpled layoff notice that felt like a death warrant. Yet, my sister Clara didn't even look at my tear-stained face before she started screaming about the interest rates on her brand new sedan. The air in the room grew thick with a suffocating, toxic entitlement as my mother crossed her arms. Her silence a sharp blade that cut deeper than any insult, effectively endorsing the verbal assault launched by her youngest favorite. Then came the sound of duct tape tearing, a harsh, rhythmic screech that signaled my father was already upstairs, methodically packing my life into cardboard boxes like I was nothing more than a tenant who had fallen behind on rent. They didn't ask how I would eat or where I would sleep. They only saw a broken tool that was no longer useful for maintaining their lifestyle. As I watched my father drag my suitcases toward the front door, his eyes cold and devoid of any paternal warmth, I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. They truly had no idea that while I was paying their mortgage, I was also building an empire they could never touch. The cardboard boxes sat like jagged tombstones on the sidewalk, a public display of my eviction that made the neighbors peer through their blinds with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. My father's breath hitched in the cold air, but he didn't offer a hug or even a backward glance as he retreated into the warmth of the house I had finished paying off just 3 years prior. Through the glass of the front door, I saw Clara already dragging her vanity into my old bedroom. Her laughter muffled but unmistakable, a celebratory sound marking the conquest of my private sanctuary. They moved with such frantic, greedy energy, fueled by the delusion that removing me was the solution to their impending financial collapse rather than the catalyst for it. I stood there for a moment, my fingers trembling as I reached into my coat pocket to touch the cold, heavy brass key that felt like a secret weapon against the betrayal stinging my heart. It was the key to a coastal sanctuary, a sprawling beach house in Malibu that I had purchased under a shell corporation, a place they had never visited and didn't even know existed. For years, I had played the role of the humble provider, hiding my true net worth to ensure they learned the value of a dollar. A lesson they had clearly failed with flying colors. As I hauled my heavy suitcases toward my car, the headlights of a passing vehicle illuminated the sheer malice etched into my family's faces as they watched from the upstairs window. They thought they were casting me out into the wilderness to starve, unaware that they had just handed me the freedom to finally stop lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. The ignition turned with a low predatory growl, and as I pulled away from the curb, I saw my mother pulling the heavy velvet curtains shut, physically erasing me from the narrative of their lives. I drove through the silent suburban streets, the neon signs of the city blurring into streaks of electric blue and crimson against the windshield, mimicking the chaotic swirl of emotions crashing inside my chest. Every monthly payment for Clara's car, every cent of Dad's exorbitant health insurance premiums, and every repair for that aging roof flickered through my mind like a ledger of wasted devotion. They viewed my termination from the firm as a personal inconvenience, a breach of contract rather than a human tragedy, proving that our bond was purely transactional in their eyes. What they didn't realize was that the company I allegedly lost my job at was merely a subsidiary of a much larger holding firm, one that I had spent the last decade quietly acquiring share by share. I wasn't just an employee who had been laid off. I was the silent majority owner who had orchestrated a strategic restructuring to flush out the dead weight and test the loyalty of those around me. The betrayal I witnessed tonight was the final piece of data I needed to finalize my decision to cut the umbilical cord of their unearned luxury as the city skyline began to recede in my rearview mirror, replaced by the dark, winding silhouettes of the coastal highway. I felt the heavy weight of their expectations finally sliding off my shoulders. I reached over to the passenger seat and opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating a digital document that would effectively terminate the lease on the life they currently enjoyed. With a single decisive keystroke, I authorized the immediate cessation of all automated transfers, freezing the accounts that fueled my family's parasitic lifestyle. I could almost hear the silence that would soon fall over their household when the power was cut. The internet vanished, and the luxury sedan in the driveway was flagged for repossession. My phone began to vibrate incessantly, Clara's name flashing across the display. I ignored the calls, watching the waves of the Pacific Ocean crash against the cliffs beneath the moonlight. I pulled the car into the hidden drive of the Malibu estate. This house was a fortress of glass and steel, a monument to my resilience. As the headlights swept across the manicured lawn, I realized that the job I had lost was merely a disguise. They had discarded the very person holding the key to their existence. Inside the expansive foyer, I dropped my keys onto the glass table. My phone lit up again with a frantic text from my mother about a declined grocery card. The first tremors had begun. I walked to the windows overlooking the ocean, realizing I was no longer the daughter who sought approval. I was the force that sustained everything they had mistaken for their own success. I initiated the eviction. The process moved like a digital executioner through the system. My phone filled with voicemails, threats, confusion, rage. But I only watched the tide. By morning, repossession began. Cars taken. Accounts frozen. The house no longer theirs. And for the first time, they understood what it meant to live without the invisible infrastructure I had always provided. In the Malibu house, silence returned. Not the oppressive silence of neglect, but the calm of control. I stood watching the ocean, finally free of the roles they had forced me to play. They called me ungrateful while I carried them. They called me a failure while I built everything. They called me a stranger while I paid for their entire world. And now, without me, their world stopped. But mine had only just begun.